Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with Appalachian Trail Thru-Hiker and author Brian Livingston. He recently stepped away from his career as an insurance defense attorney to focus on marketing and successfully publishing his novel, The Habits of Squirrels. He is very well versed on outdoor activities, hiking, writing, literature, and the horrors of attempting to switch one's careers in their 30s. He's got a great story. Enjoy this interview.
Thanks for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, of course. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. Yeah, you got an interesting tapestry of things going on, and I want to know before we get into that, talk to me a little bit about how you survived COVID. You know, it's been quite a time on Earth for all of us, and what revelations did you come to? How did this last 2 years change you?
Yeah, it's definitely been interesting. I got married during COVID, and then before that, moved in with my wife probably a couple months before COVID. So we went from sort of a long distance relationship to a very close sort of, I won't say prison, but very, we saw a lot of each other for a couple of years during the quarantine. In terms of it changing me, I wrote a lot. When you're not commuting to work, I was still working, but I was, I wasn't having to commute. It opens up some more time in the day, so I wrote a lot and sort of got to add more depth than perhaps I otherwise would have been able to do to the story. And then just sort of on a less selfish, more broad scale, you learn how vulnerable everything is and how quickly everything can be sort of brought to its knees.
For sure. And, and I was thinking, this was a solitary time, so writing is definitely something that would fall within that wheelhouse. So you had quite a career change. You used to have a different life. You walked away to get into publishing. So before we get into that story, if someone was to run into you right now and say, what do you do? Who are you? What do you do? How would you answer them?
I'm working on that answer, but for the past couple of weeks, it's been a pretty firm, I'm an author. I'm working on promoting my book, The Habits of Squirrels. And then I sort of go into my pitch and, wrangle up another reader.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so you walked away from a career as an insurance defense attorney. Talk to me a little bit about how you arrived at that decision.
It's sort of a day-by-day thing. On one end, I never really enjoyed being an insurance defense attorney. So just day by day, I got more frustrated with it. And then each day I was spending more time on my book. And, whether that was writing or, later on trying to promote. And it all just sort of came to a head, so there's some other factors, some family issues that cropped up, and it all just sort of came to a head. And I realized that, I wasn't going to be able to do the things that I wanted to be able to do, in terms of promoting the book and spending the time doing stuff like this. And I did not want my insurance defense career to be the reason that I was not going to be able to, really explore the things that I actually enjoyed.
Well, and I would imagine that something like a global pandemic would have magnified that a little bit.
Yeah. It's hard to fully gauge the impact and the weight that had on it, but that changes the perspective on everything and sort of winnows it down to make you realize what you actually enjoy, what's important to you.
Well, and you're a hiker too. Where are you located exactly?
I'm in Charleston, South Carolina, and then for about 2 years now, and then prior to that I was in Greenville, South Carolina, so more up in the mountains.
Yeah, that's a part of the country that I've never really been to, and I always hear wonderful things about between North and South Carolina. There's so much beauty out there.
Yeah, it's pretty much anything you'd want to do. Anywhere you are in those states, you're either 3 hours from the beach or 3 hours from the mountains. So it's a nice part of the world.
The one thing I have not been able to wrap my head around, I went and traveled through the South about 4 years ago. I went from Florida up back here to Kansas City. And I had never seen boiled peanuts. So I was like, "What? Why are they wet? What's up?" And they're like, "Oh, you don't understand. This is this is what happens down here." And I was like, "Okay, all right, we'll give it a shot." So yeah, that always threw me for a tailspin coming from this part of the country.
Did you enjoy them?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting, you know. I mean, I think there's a part when you get into a new food that your brain's already kind of decided on something. But yeah, I mean, it was fine. It was easy to crack open. I mean, I'm used to having to crack them open and play with them in a dry sense. So when they're wet, it's like you got most of the game's gone, you know.
Oh yeah,
but,
I grew up with them because I grew up in Atlanta, and most of my family's from the South, so I never really thought twice about them. But I sort of developed a theory that they're one of those things where if you haven't eaten them by maybe 12 years old, you know, it's too late, and they just kind of seem weird and alien and slimy to you. Because my wife grew up in Baton Rouge, but I guess they don't have them there, or she didn't encounter them, and she can't touch them. She can't have anything to do with them.
Yeah, I was in my 40s, and I was like, let's go. But I'm all for digging into like new culinary adventures, so I'm fine. You know, I mean, my son and I are the only ones in my immediate family that can really get in to serious sushi eating, so it's fine. You know, I'm not afraid of it. But so let's go back into your life and kind of get into your lineage of how you got into your profession. You know, prior to writing, what was your childhood like, and how did you kind of get this motivation to probably the seeds of being an author? How did that all begin for you?
You know, I grew up in the suburbs of Atlanta, in Marietta, Georgia. You know, I grew up in a neighborhood, and we sort of had that roving band of kids, maybe something out of like a Stephen King novel, that was always, you know, playing football or just sort of roaming through the woods, building forts or damming up the creek or something like that. So that sort of started the outdoor aspect of my life, and that's something that's continued for most of it. And then the writing thing, it's just sort of always been on the radar. I can remember, like, in fourth grade, you know, one of my teachers saying that I was a good writer and that was something that I should consider. And so, you know, in high school, I took maybe one creative writing class, and then same thing in college. I never really put my foot down and sort of said to the world that, like, I'm going to try and be an author, because that's a terrifying thing to say. And then, you know, after college, I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail. I went on to law school, and then sort of lived in rural South Carolina, where I was a prosecutor. You know, just having that time and sort of always carrying that dream of being a writer. I just sort of started dwelling on my Appalachian Trail experiences, and just sort of started waking up earlier in the mornings and writing before I went to work, and then putting a couple hours in before I went to bed, and just sort of, you know, kept my feet moving, and eventually sort of a novel popped out.
Coming from this part of the country, I mean, there are ways that you can hike. There's not the terrain that you would have. So my question is that when you say you're a hiker, how does that work? How do you get to that point where that's something that you say you are, and what do you like the best about that?
It's something, you know, now that I live in Charleston, where it's sort of like you. I mean, there is hiking, but it's not up and down mountains. I don't know. You know, having thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail, I think that, you know, it's sort of like, you know, when you win a tournament on the PGA and you get your card, you know, stamped for the next 5 years or something like that. So, you know, I think I might be riding that wave. I don't get out the hike as much as I would like, although I did get out this past weekend. It's just, it might just be sort of a mindset more than anything. When you're sitting at the desk, you have a lot of things that you can think about, what you would rather be doing. And for me, it's usually hiking. You know, it may be sufficient right there just to call yourself a hiker.
You know, there's always that artistic flashpoint that we have too, where the curtains kind of part. What was that for you from a literary standpoint? What book did you read that floored you, that made you think, wow, this is a world that I'd like to explore more?
Oh, man. You know, in ninth grade, I read Catcher in the Rye, like I think like the rest of the American population. You know, that was a character that I really identified with, just as another antisocial young teen. And then, you know, more specifically, there's a book, Bound for Glory, by Woody Guthrie. That's sort of his autobiography about his childhood growing up sort of in the Dust Bowl in Oklahoma. And it's just so vividly written, and it's very unpretentious, and it's, it has a lot of emotional tugs and then a big emotional moments because it was a hard time to be growing up. And, and in all that, it also has sort of the roving band of kids having like dirt wars and rock wars, and then goes into his sort of the roots of his like protest songs and his sort of folk career. And that's a book, I probably read it twice in high school and probably twice since then, that really ignited me as to, something similar-ish to my voice that sort of stood the test of time and been revered by the people I revere.
The other part of this, too, is the people that we look up to, role models, heroes. Who have those been for you?
Early on, it was Bob Dylan. I read his book when I was in high school, Chronicles, and then, I think it's the only CDs I had in my car for a long time. And then moving forward, more recently, that sort of switched to John Prine, a lot of John Prine more recently. And then even when I was writing the book, because my protagonist is a retired mailman, John Prine was a mailman before he sort of got discovered. I would go back and just listen to a lot of John Prine interviews in addition to the songs and try and sort of capture his voice. In the writing world, I know I've already mentioned it, but Stephen King's a guy I listen to a lot, I read a lot, and sort of, obviously his book on writing is sort of like the seminal work for people trying to get into the business. And then, I've read Frank Herbert, Dune, recently, J.R.R. Tolkien. My trail name on the Appalachian Trail was Mr. Frodo. And, Woody Guthrie, just a lot. J.D. Salinger.
With your book, give me a little bit of a teaser. If anyone out there is like, all right, I like this guy, I'm ready to kind of delve into his world, give me the pitch. How would you pitch this book to get somebody to get it?
Yeah, so in 2013, I thru-hiked the Appalachian Trail, and then with the idea of writing, I sort of decided that there's enough memoirs out there that maybe my story couldn't hold a full-length memoir or novel. So it takes place on a fictional trail. It follows Gabe Jenkins. He's a retired mailman from a small southern town, and it follows his trek and how he uses his thru-hike to assess sort of his familial relationships, particularly with his estranged son who's moved away, his relationship with his wife, how he feels about his career. And it's it's really highlighted by the sort of eccentric trail characters that he meets along the way, which are all loosely based on people that I met during my thru-hike and people that I know are out there and things I've read in other memoirs. And then the landscapes and achievements and mountains that he climbs as he works his way north.
If you could meet one person alive today on the planet, who would it be?
Oh, man. It's changed recently because for a while it was John Prine, and then it was Norm Macdonald, and neither of them are with us anymore. There might be a recency bias here just because I just saw him, but Dave Matthews of Dave Matthews Band, he's an interesting guy, has some weird stage banter, and then he's also immensely talented. And it's sort of, I'm 32. I don't remember life without him. Sort of been the soundtrack of my generation. So even though I'm not the biggest Dave Matthews fan, it just for the sake of, meeting someone that's probably going to be enjoyable and leave you with an interesting story, probably Dave Matthews.
Yeah, I actually, I interview a lot of jazz musicians, and I interviewed Jeff Coffin, who's in the band, and he had some pretty interesting tales to dispense about it, just how he got into the band and what that world's like. And I come from that. I'm Generation X, so yeah, Dave Matthews is pretty perennial when it comes to that era of music. So let's say, the world is obviously opening up. Things are getting better. But let's say we talk in 5 years from now. We just catch up, and I'm like, hey, what's up? What's happened? What are you happy to see that's happened in your life? What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to finishing out the process on the first book, to keep keep promoting, sort of keep opening doors and get it into as many hands and I guess as many speakers as possible. And then starting on a second book and just starting on the next path. My life right now is pretty much full transition, in between careers. I genuinely do not know where the next step's going to take me. And, I'm one of those guys that sort of checks his emails religiously to see what's going on. And, it's hard to predict, hopefully celebrating a second book and, working on promoting a full-length author career. But if not, I'm sure something else interesting as well.
What's the best fan letter you ever got?
Oh man, these early reviews are fun. My book only came out in March, so every time get on Amazon or Goodreads and see those 5 stars, it's a lot of fun. One of my early buddies, who was sort of an advanced reader for me, I sent him a copy. And then 3 days later, he called me. He's like, I read it in 3 days. I couldn't put it down. Like, thank you for this book. And that was one of those moments where, I spent the rest of the afternoon smiling. So that stuck out to me, even though it wasn't an unassociated fan.
Everyone has a perception of you, your family, your friends, your readers, those that know you. But ultimately, you live your life. You have a perception of who you are. Who do you think you are?
I was talking to one of my friend's dads from growing up recently, and he told me that I was sort of on the fringe. And I'd never put that phrase out there before, but I think that's pretty close. I've always sort of considered myself a tweener in between, sort of being maybe full-on hippie or full-on alternative, and then, more of the conventional business world. With, being in the law career, and then also, spending a lot of time at concerts and spending my nights and mornings writing a novel about hiking and sort of eccentric characters. And, I've worked on it, but that's sort of where I've come to sort of understand that I exist, is sort of on the fringe, being able to look both ways and sort of, hopefully draw on both to, infuse my art.
So, Brian, if anybody wants to get involved with your book and get involved with any events or look into your life a little bit more, where's the best place out there on the interwebs for them to go?
Yep. So I have a website, brianlivingstonbooks.com. You can buy my book there. You can contact me through that. I'm active on Instagram at Brian Livingston Books. I'm on Twitter at Livingston Books, and then I'm on Facebook at author Brian Livingston. And then, I'm out sort of trying to get on the street and promote my book. I'll be at the Book Exchange in Marietta, Georgia on July 16th from 12 to 4, signing books, selling books, and hopefully talking to fans.
Cool, man. Brian, hey, this has been great. And good luck with everything as we move forward and with the next book. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, I really appreciate you having me on.
Thanks for tuning into another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.